Hello and welcome to Life is a Scale Model. If you haven't already, please take some time to subscribe to the channel and like this video. It really helps us in the algorithm and it gives us a lot more flexibility to bring you guys some great builds in the future. Today we're going to be moving on to part 2 of our motion picture enterprise build, which is base coating and detailing. As you can see, I've used the Tamiya TS45 Pearl White to base coat, and we've got a pretty decent base coat all around. I might need a little bit more practice with sanding, but that's kind of what modeling's all about, is learning as you go and figuring out how to improve. So to get this model started, now that we've got it built, I went ahead with some white primer and I laid down a primer coat. Primer coat just gives the paint a good surface to adhere to. It helps with flaking problems and paint peeling off in the future. So it's always good to hit your model with a good primer coat if you're going to actually paint it. And I really felt a need to paint this one because if you don't, you can see a lot of the copyright information that they put on the inside of the upper part of the saucer through the plastic. Although it should be mentioned, the plastic is molded in pearl white, so if you don't want to paint it, you don't necessarily have to. Now here we are applying that Tamiya pearl white, and as you can see, as I'm spraying, I'm doing little U-shapes, and that's just to kind of help get good coverage and make sure that I get a good even coat. You can also see lots and lots of spray paint fumes. This is why I strongly suggest that if you're going to spray paint, you do so in a good ventilated area. I'm in my garage right now because Mother Nature has not been cooperative when it comes to rain, and this is the safest place to do things. We're going to finish up that base coat, and once we're done with that base coat, we will let it all dry, and then we will take it in and we'll start doing some detail painting. There's not a lot of detail painting to do today. Just a little bit. We're going to focus on the bridge module, the impulse crystals, some little spots on the front of the nacelles, the sensor dome at the bottom of the saucer, and some little arrowhead shaped things on the warp nacelles themselves. So we're going to start with the bridge module, and as you can see on the screen, I used titanium gold from Tamiya to paint the bridge dome. For one, I just think the color looks really good as I'm looking at my reference material and trying to figure out which colors would work best. But also, I felt like it brought a little bit of the heritage of the Enterprise to the model, because we used that Tamiya titanium gold when we built our NX-01. For the impulse crystal, I'm using Arctic Gem from Warpainter. I usually use a Tamiya Sky Blue, but it only comes in gloss, and much like painting with old Bob, you'll know that a thin paint will stick to a thick paint, but a thick paint won't stick to a thin paint. And likewise, a flat paint won't stick to a gloss paint. But a gloss paint will stick to a flat paint. So I'm just trying to avoid having gloss paints. For those little shapes on the nacelles, I'm going to use Tamiya copper. I know in previous models I used brass instead of copper because it looks better at scale, but these are so small I thought, I think I'm just going to go ahead and use the copper. I made a goof, so I'm taking a wet Q-tip and I'm just gently removing the paint, and I'll try again. If you put down some paint and you find that you're not very happy with it, that's okay. Just wipe it off gently. Don't use any abrasive chemicals to remove it. Just wipe it off with some water and a Q-tip and try again. I hate to admit that these days I end up having to do that more often than I like to admit because my old hands are starting to get a little more shaky than they used to be. But just make sure that you dry the area completely before you attempt to paint again as well. That's what happened there. I hadn't gotten all the water off and the paint wasn't laying down properly. But now I'm just gonna, as carefully as I can, go in there and paint those little arrow-shaped parts on the nacelles to make them stand out once we got the decals on. One thing I've learned that makes painting with shakier hands a little easier is if you can figure out a way to have the model set firmly on a surface so you're not trying to hold it and paint at the same time. It really helps. It gets a little bit tricky when you're trying to hold a model steady and keep your hand steady that's painting at the same time. And we don't want to make too much trouble or work for ourselves, so we'll just, try to get that thing firmly planted on a surface at any time we can. Now you'll see I got a little bit of copper where I didn't want it. And so I'm going to turn to my little Q-tip and I'm just going to wipe it off. And unfortunately my bombastic hair is going to block a lot of it. It needs a little bit of, I need a little bit of a trim. I'm getting a little bit scraggly. But true to my word, I am working on some of my blocking issues. Trying to make sure that you guys can see what I'm doing and not have to stare at my boring, fantastic hair. Now for these warp nacelle things that are on the front, I used Vallejo German Gray. It's dark, but once it dries you can definitely tell it's not quite black. And that's kind of what I was going for. So I'm just real carefully in there. I'm trying to paint. This detail is not very well defined, so it's a little difficult to see where you want to lay down the paint. And once again I goofed. So here we go, back to my wet Q-tip. I'm just going to scrub it and start over again. And honestly, it doesn't really matter how many times you have to do this. I guess as long as you don't start stripping your base coat or getting color residue or remnants where they shouldn't be. But if you find yourself having to paint something 2, 3, 4 times in a row, don't fret. Just go slow, do your best, and work with it till you're happy. It's your model, and ultimately at the end of the day, you should be happy with the results from building your model. So I'm just very carefully getting in there and doing that painting, and you can see from this angle that pearl white really pops. Some of the pictures I've taken and as I'm working with it, it's really hard to see that there's a pearlescent sheen. Of course, we're doing pearl because, when Doug Trumbull and crew were working on the special effects for Star Trek: The Motion Picture, they got to kind of reimagine the way that our best friend, the Enterprise, would look on the screen for that film. And famously, they used a bunch of different pearlized colors to create this mosaic on the surface of the ship that we call Aztecing these days. But of course, at 2500 scale, this little rascal's way too small for us to tape off and do different pearl colors with to get that effect. So all we're doing is we're putting the pearl down, and when we put on the decals, the semi-transparent decals will pick up that pearl and give us a real good effect. In hindsight, I don't know, I might have done this particular bit of detail painting before I actually put the model together, just to make those nacelle front caps a little bit more accessible. I also probably would have done the filling on the engineering section before I put the saucer section on, because I had a little bit of trouble getting my sandpaper into those tiny little nooks and crannies with my big fat fingers. But all's well that ends well. I'm just doing a little touch up to try to make those nacelle caps look a little bit more symmetrical. And finally, we're going to use Tamiya titanium silver on the sensor pod there at the bottom of the saucer. And again, I chose this particular color because it speaks to the heritage of the ship. Titanium silver, if you haven't watched my NX-01 builds, I highly recommend you go back and watch those, but titanium silver was the color that I used as the base color for those particular ships. And so I really wanted to bring some of that into this particular model, just to kind of give that idea that Starfleet's got a uniform heritage that they honor and that they try to stick to. I apologize. You get to see my terrible overgrown hair, but I am working on blocking. And fortunately, this was really the only time that I got really overzealous with putting my hair in frame. If you have any suggestions on how I could position my camera or record that would lessen my blocking issues, feel free to put some constructive ideas down there in the comments. But yeah, we got a short one today. That's going to do it. We'll be back next week doing the decals. So until then, be safe and happy modeling.